I let him believe I was broke for almost 2 years. Not struggling, not retired comfortably, broke. There is a difference, and my son-in-law, Brent Calloway, enjoyed that difference more than a decent man should. He liked saying things like, Daniel, you don't have to worry about that anymore whenever money came up. He said it with a smile, usually while wearing a watch too large for his wrist and shoes polished bright enough to make a room feel cheaper. The first time he said it, we were at Arbor Hall in Omaha, sitting under those ridiculous brass chandeliers that make everyone look a little guilty. My daughter Claire was beside him, folding and unfolding the corner of her napkin. I noticed that. I noticed small things. I was a forensic accountant for 31 years. Small things paid my mortgage. Brent leaned back, lifted 2 fingers at the waiter, like he owned oxygen, and said, we've got it covered, Dan. Dan. My name is Daniel Reeves. My wife, Margaret, called me Danny when she wanted something fixed, and Daniel when I had done something wrong. Nobody called me Dan except men trying to shorten me. I touched the face of my Omega Seamaster with my thumb. 1998 model. Blue dial, tiny scratch between the 10 and 11 from the year I dropped it in the garage while replacing a furnace filter during an ice storm. Margaret gave me that watch on our 25th anniversary, back when we still thought we had more time than we did. I looked at Brent and said, that's kind of you. And trust me, it was not kind. Here's the thing about being underestimated. Most men correct people too early. They rush to defend themselves. They show statements, titles, properties, names. They need the room to know they still matter. I have never been that kind of man. I read numbers twice, even when I already know the answer. I measure a problem before touching it. Cleverness is fast. What I do is slow. So when Brent began treating me like a harmless old man with a thin pension and a dead wife's furniture, I let him. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you genuinely. I was 58 then, living alone in a brick house in Dundee, Omaha, 3 blocks from Memorial Park. The house had a stubborn front step, a maple tree that dropped leaves like unpaid bills every October, and a basement office with 2 filing cabinets, 1 locked safe, and a coffee machine that made sounds like it was losing an argument. Every morning, I woke at 5:42. Not 5:40, not 5:45, 5:42, because Margaret used to say that gave a man 3 minutes to change his mind before the day officially started. I fed the neighbor's orange cat, who did not belong to me but had apparently reviewed the paperwork and disagreed. I made toast. I drank coffee black. Then I went downstairs and reviewed numbers for private clients who still needed someone quiet to tell them where their money had gone. That was my life. Quiet, repetitive, honest. Then Claire stopped calling on Tuesdays. That was the first red flag. For 12 years, since she moved out after college, my daughter called me every Tuesday evening. Sometimes for 40 minutes, sometimes for 4. Once during tax season, she called just to say, I'm alive, you're alive, good enough, and hung up before I could ask about her breaks. Claire was funny that way, dry, fast, like her mother. But after she married Brent, the Tuesday calls became shorter, then later, then missed. At first, I told myself, marriage changes rhythms. That is true. People build new lives. Fathers have to learn not to stand in the doorway holding old expectations like unpaid invoices. But there's changing rhythm, and then there's disappearing. One Tuesday in March at 8:17 p.m., I called her. She answered on the 5th ring. Hey, Dad. 2 words. Flat. I was standing in my kitchen with the refrigerator door open, holding a jar of mustard I had not intended to use. The light made the floor look pale and cold. You all right? I asked. Yeah. Just tired. Work? A pause. Yeah. Work. Claire worked as a pediatric occupational therapist at a clinic near Aksar Ben village. She loved that job the way some people love music. She came home with marker on her sleeve, stickers stuck to her phone, and stories about children who learned to button coats like they had conquered Everest. When Claire said work like that, something in my stomach shifted. You sound far away, I said. She tried to laugh. It did not land. I'm just busy. In the background, Brent said something, not loud, just enough. A male voice with the softness men use when they want control to sound like concern. Claire lowered her voice. I have to go. Claire. What? I touched my watch again. Are you okay? There was a little sound then. Not crying, not even close. Just air catching in her throat. I'm fine. Fine is a word that sounds like a compliment but isn't. I sat in my car for a while after that call. I don't know why. It was in the garage. I had nowhere to go. I just sat behind the wheel of my 2011 Honda Accord with 146,209 miles on it and listened to the engine tick as it cooled, even though I had not driven it. I mean that literally. Some men pace, some drink, some call people and say too much. I sit. The next morning, I drove to Harold's Coffee House in Florence to meet Marcus Hale. Marcus had been my attorney for 25 years and my friend for almost as long, though he would object to the word friend because it sounds inefficient. He was 6'2", bald by choice after nature got impatient and wore gray suits that looked like they had been negotiated into existence. We met in 1999 during a fraud audit involving a grain distributor, 3 shell companies, and a bookkeeper named Linda who kept every receipt in shoe boxes labeled by emotion. One box said, suspicious. I will not be taking questions about that. Marcus slid into the booth across from me at 7:03 a.m. and said, you look like a man who found a number he doesn't like. No numbers yet. That's worse. The waitress came over with coffee before he asked. She knew us. Marcus took 1 cream, no sugar. I took mine black because at some point in my life, I confused suffering with character and never corrected it. I told him about Claire, the missed calls, the careful voice, Brent's little comments, the way he had started answering questions meant for her. Marcus listened without interrupting, which was one of his better qualities and most annoying habits. When I finished, he stirred his coffee once. Could be nothing. I know. Could be a marriage finding its shape. I know that too. But you don't think it is. I looked out the window at a city bus sighing to a stop near the curb. No, Marcus nodded. Then don't confront him. I wasn't planning to. Good. Because men like that love a confrontation, gives them something to perform against. That sentence stayed with me. Men like that. I had not said what kind of man Brent was. Not yet. Marcus heard it anyway. Brent Calloway was polished in the way certain rental cars are polished. Clean, bright, and not built to last. He sold commercial insurance products for a regional firm downtown, though he described it as risk architecture, which made Marcus once choke on a dinner roll. He met Claire at a charity fundraiser for the children's clinic. He bid $1,200 on a silent auction package for a weekend in Kansas City, then told everyone he believed in supporting the vulnerable. Claire thought he was generous. I thought he liked being seen giving. Those are not the same thing. The first Christmas he came to my house, he brought a $90 bottle of wine and spent 20 minutes explaining it to people drinking grocery store Cabernet from mismatched glasses. Margaret would have destroyed him with one sentence, but Margaret had been gone 3 years by then, and grief had made me slower in rooms where I used to be quick. Claire loved him. That mattered. So I was polite. He called me sir for about 6 months. Then Daniel. Then Dan. Then, once, when he thought I couldn't hear him from the hallway, the old man. I didn't react. I was putting away dessert plates, lemon bars, Claire's favorite. I just stood there with one plate in my hand and counted the seconds between his laugh and hers. 7. That number bothered me more than the insult because Claire did not laugh right away. She waited. People think betrayal sounds like shouting. Sometimes it sounds like your daughter pausing 7 seconds before pretending something is funny. By the spring of 2022, Brent had begun managing things. That was his word. He managed dinner reservations, managed vacation plans, managed Claire's clinic schedule when family events came up, managed her car repairs, though she had been handling oil changes since she was 16 and once replaced a battery in a Target parking lot while wearing church clothes. Then he started managing me. Daniel, you should really think about downsizing. Daniel, that house is too much for one person. Daniel, have you looked into assisted living communities? Not now, obviously. Just planning ahead. Planning ahead. Think about that for a second. A 41-year-old man in loafers without socks was discussing my decline while eating my pot roast at my table under a roof I had paid off when he was still learning long division. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I said, I'll keep that in mind. He smiled like he had won something. Claire looked down at her plate. That night after they left, I washed every dish by hand, even though the dishwasher worked perfectly. Old habit. Margaret used to say the sink gave you time to tell the truth to yourself. The truth was simple. My daughter was shrinking. Not physically. Claire still moved quickly, still wore her hair in that messy knot, still forgot umbrellas in every building she entered, but something had folded inward. Her jokes came later. Her eyes checked Brent before answering questions. Her shoulders lifted when his phone buzzed. I had seen that before in financial interviews. Employees who knew the boss was lying, junior partners trapped inside a scheme, people who had not done wrong yet, but had stood close enough to wrong that they could smell smoke on their own clothes. I didn't know it yet, but the money would come later. It always does. For a while, I watched only my daughter. I invited her to lunch without Brent. She canceled twice. The third time she came to a small Italian place on Leavenworth Street wearing a blue cardigan Margaret had knitted in 2014. One sleeve had a pulled thread near the cuff. You're wearing your mother's sweater, I said. Claire looked down, almost surprised by herself. Yeah, I guess I needed it today. The waiter appeared with water and asked if we wanted appetizers. We both stared at him a little too long. Bread is fine, I said. He backed away slowly, which was fair. Claire smiled at that. A real one. Small but real. For 20 minutes we talked about normal things. Her clinic. My neighbor's cat. A pothole on Underwood Avenue that had achieved landmark status. Then I asked one question. Is Brent kind to you? Her hand froze around the water glass. Not shook. Froze. That told me enough to become very careful. She looked toward the window, where traffic moved through pale noon light. He's under pressure. That wasn't my question. Her jaw tightened. Not anger, containment. He loves me. I didn't ask that either. She blinked fast once. Dad, please. So I stopped. That may sound weak. It wasn't. Sometimes the first rule of helping someone is not forcing them to deny the truth before they are ready to say it. I paid the check with a debit card from an account Brent believed held my grocery money. He had no idea that the card was tied to one of 6 accounts. He had no idea that my house was inside a trust. He had no idea that the building his firm leased on Farnham Street had passed through a holding company I controlled after Margaret's brother died. And he absolutely had no idea that in 38 days he would walk into a conference room with glass walls, sit across from me, and ask me to sign papers that would ruin him if I understood what they really meant. I understood them before he finished his first sentence. But that day at lunch, I just looked at my daughter's frozen hand and felt something inside me go very, very quiet. I didn't go home after that lunch. Instead, I drove 3 blocks past my street, circled once, then parked along a stretch of curb where the maple trees leaned just enough to make the light uneven. I sat there with the engine off, hands on the wheel, watching nothing in particular. You know what I did? I counted. Not cars, not people, patterns. How many times Claire checked her phone during lunch? 6. How long she held eye contact when answering a direct question? Never more than 3 seconds. How often she said Brent's name without being asked? Twice, both times defensive. Those are not accidents. Those are indicators. I touched my watch again. There is a difference between suspicion and confirmation. Suspicion is a feeling. Confirmation is a structure. I needed structure. So I did what I've always done when something didn't sit right. I went looking for the numbers. Now, here's the thing about family. You don't audit them. You don't subpoena your daughter's marriage like it's a failing business. There are lines, quiet, invisible lines that decent people don't cross unless they have a very good reason. That lunch gave me a reason. Not proof, not yet, but a reason. That evening at 6:12 p.m., I sat in my basement office, the one with the low hum of fluorescent lights and the filing cabinet that sticks if you pull too fast, and I opened my laptop. I wasn't looking for Brent, not directly. I started with something simple. His firm, Callaway and Renshaw Risk Group, regional, mid-size, about 40 employees, specializing in commercial liability coverage for construction and logistics companies. I knew the type. Fast talkers, faster contracts, and just enough complexity to hide things in plain sight. Public records gave me the basics. Incorporation date, board members, leasing information, a list of associated LLCs that looked a little too neat. That was the first real shift. Something in my stomach moved again. Most firms like that have a bit of mess. Old partnerships, dissolved entities, names that don't quite line up. This one was clean. Too clean. Assembled like a catalog set. I leaned back in my chair and said out loud, "All right." No one answered. That was fine. I dug deeper. Property records. The building on Farnham Street, Suite 400 through 412, leased under a holding company called Midridge Commercial Assets, LLC. I knew that name. Not from Brent, from Margaret's brother, Thomas. Thomas had been a cautious man, slow with money, slower with trust. He built small things carefully and held on to them longer than most people would. When he passed in 2019, a portion of his estate, some quiet real estate holdings, had been folded into a trust structure I oversaw. I opened the trust documents. Revocable living trust. Reeves family asset structure. My structure. Midridge Commercial Assets sat 2 layers beneath a holding entity I controlled. I mean that literally. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then I almost smiled. Almost. "Marcus," I said to the empty room, "you're going to enjoy this." The next morning, 7:01 a.m., Harold's Coffee House again. Marcus slid into the booth, took one look at my face and said, "That's not a could-be-nothing face." "No. What is it?" I didn't hand him papers right away. I've learned that if you give Marcus documents too soon, he reads them before you finish the sentence, and then you lose control of the conversation. So I said, "The building Brent's firm operates out of Farnham Street. Do you remember who owns it?" Marcus frowned slightly. "I'd have to check." "You don't." I let that sit. He leaned forward a little. "That tone worries me." "Midridge Commercial Assets, LLC." He blinked once, then twice. "That's familiar." "It should be." I slid the folder across the table. He opened it, scanned the first page, then the second, then stopped entirely. His jaw did that slow grinding thing. "Daniel," he said quietly, "are you telling me?" "I'm telling you Brent goes to work every day in a building controlled by a trust I oversee." Marcus sat back. For a man who negotiates multi-million-dollar disputes without raising his pulse, that was close to shock. "Well," he said after a moment, "that's inconvenient for him." I almost smiled again. Almost. Keep reading, I said. He did. There was more. Because it wasn't just the building. Callaway and Renshaw had recently expanded, took on a new set of clients in late 2021, mostly mid-tier construction firms that needed bundled coverage. The expansion had been financed through a private credit line routed through a lending entity called Halcyon Bridge Capital. Marcus flipped the page. Don't tell me. I won't tell you, I said. You'll read it. He read. Halcyon Bridge Capital was tied to another holding structure, smaller, more recent, but still within reach. Still within my reach. Marcus closed the folder slowly. I will not be taking questions about that, he said. Good, I replied, because I don't have all the answers yet. We sat there in silence for a few seconds. The waitress refilled our coffee without asking. That helped. Marcus tapped the folder once. Do you think he knows? No. You're sure? Yes. Why? I looked at him. Because if he knew, he wouldn't talk to me the way he does. Marcus nodded. That was fair. Men who know they're standing on your ground don't insult you at dinner. They negotiate. Brent had never negotiated with me. He had performed. That meant he thought I was irrelevant, which meant he hadn't followed the structure far enough, which meant he hadn't looked closely enough at the names behind the names. That was mistake number one. Marcus leaned back, exhaled slowly. All right, he said. Let's assume he doesn't know. What do you want to do? That is the moment most people imagine as the turning point. The place where a man decides to strike, to confront, to expose. It wasn't. I picked up my coffee, took a sip, and said, nothing. Marcus stared at me. Nothing? For now. He tilted his head slightly. Explain. Right now. I said, I have information. I don't have intent. You think there's more. I know there's more. I tapped the folder lightly. This is structure. Clean. Too clean. People don't build things this neatly unless they're hiding something or preparing for something. Marcus considered that. So you wait. Yes. And in the meantime, I watch. He almost smiled. That's what you do best. I measure twice, I said. He nodded and cut once. We sat there a while longer, going over possibilities, not plans, not yet, just angles. If Brent was involved in something questionable, it would show up in one of three places. Cash flow irregularities, client onboarding patterns, or internal compensation shifts that didn't align with reported growth. I had seen all three before. Different industries, same behavior. People think numbers lie. They don't. People lie. Numbers just sit there waiting to be read properly. By the time we left Harold's, I had a direction, not a conclusion, a direction. Over the next 2 weeks, I adjusted my routine. Not dramatically. That would have been noticeable. Just enough. I took on a consulting review for a small logistics firm that coincidentally had recently signed a policy through Callaway and Renshaw. Coincidences are useful. I asked careful questions, nothing aggressive. Just enough to understand the structure of their coverage, the timeline, the pricing adjustments. One detail stood out, a fee, small on paper, $12,480 annually, labeled as a risk alignment surcharge. The client didn't question it. It was packaged inside a larger number. Most people don't question numbers if they're wrapped correctly. I did. I traced it, not fully, not yet, but enough to see a pattern. That surcharge appeared in 3 other client summaries I reviewed over the next week. Same structure, same language, different amounts, always just small enough to avoid attention. That was the second red flag. I didn't react. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't confront Brent. I went very, very quiet. At dinner that Sunday, Brent talked about expansion again. Big things coming, he said, cutting into his steak like it had personally offended him. We're moving into a different tier. Claire nodded but didn't look at him. I watched her instead. How's the clinic? I asked. Busy, she said. Good busy or tired busy? She hesitated. Tired. Brent laughed lightly. She works too hard. I keep telling her we don't need the extra income. There it was. I set my fork down. I thought she loved her work. She does, Brent said quickly. But at some point you have to think bigger. Build something. Not just help people one at a time. Claire's hand tightened slightly around her glass. I didn't raise my voice. I've always thought helping one person at a time was the point, I said. Brent smiled. That's one way to look at it. I held up one hand. Just one. Brent. He stopped. I said his name once. Quietly, he leaned back a fraction. Yeah? How many clients did your firm take on in Q4 last year? The question landed wrong for him. You could see it. His eyes flicked to Claire, then back to me. Why? Just curious. He laughed. You don't need to worry about that stuff anymore, Dan. There it was again, Dan. I nodded slowly. You're right, I said. I don't. And that was the moment I knew, not suspected, knew, because a man who is clean doesn't deflect a simple question with condescension. He answers. Brent didn't answer. He performed. That was mistake number 2. Later that night, after they left, I went downstairs, opened the safe, and took out a second folder. Thicker, older, documents tied to the trust, control points, signature, authority, contingency clauses Margaret and I had set up years ago, back when we believed in planning ahead instead of reacting late. I ran my fingers along the edge of the paper. Okay, I said quietly, because now it wasn't just about watching. Now it was about understanding exactly how deep this went, and more importantly, how far ahead I already was. By the 3rd week, the pattern wasn't just a pattern anymore. It had edges. I had 5 clients now, different industries, different scales, same quiet line item tucked inside otherwise reasonable contracts. The wording never changed. Risk alignment surcharge. Clean. Harmless. Almost elegant. Amounts varied $12,480, $9,960, $14,220, but always structured the same way, annualized, rolled into broader coverage, small enough to disappear, large enough to matter if you knew where to look. I opened a yellow legal pad and wrote each number down by hand. Old habit. Something about ink makes the truth feel less abstract. Then I added them $61,380 across 5 clients. I sat back and looked at that number for a long time, because 5 clients don't make a system, but 5 identical mechanisms do. I touched my watch. If this scaled the way I suspected, and trust me, it did, then Brent's expansion wasn't just growth, it was extraction. Here's the thing about people who build these kinds of systems. They don't think of it as stealing. Not at first. They call it optimization, efficiency, leveraging structures. They rename the behavior until it stops sounding like what it is. But numbers don't care about language. Numbers care about direction. And all of Brent's numbers were pointing the same way. Up for him, sideways for everyone else. I didn't rush. I never rush. I built a map, client names on the left, fee structures in the center, associated entities on the right. Then I drew lines, not all of them connected. Not yet. But enough did. Enough to make my stomach do that quiet shifting thing again. I didn't know it yet, but the next piece wouldn't come from a spreadsheet. It would come from Claire. Thursday, 9:14 p.m. She called me. Not a scheduled call, not a Tuesday, not a check-in, a call. I answered on the first ring. Hey, silence for a second. Dad? Her voice was thinner than usual, not weak, just worn. I'm here. I have a question. Okay. Another pause. I could hear something in the background. Not voices, movement, like someone pacing on carpet. Hypothetically, she said, If someone's job started doing things that felt off, but you couldn't prove it, what would you do? I leaned back in my chair. Depends. On what? On whether off means illegal or just uncomfortable. I don't know. That was honest. And honesty, even partial, is something you don't interrupt. I said, tell me what off looks like. She exhaled slowly. Clients are getting charged things that don't get explained properly. Brent says it's standard. But I've heard two different people ask questions about it at events, and he brushes it off. I didn't speak right away. Claire, I said carefully, are you involved in his firm's finances? No, not directly. Indirectly? I've seen things. Not documents, just conversations. Numbers mentioned. Do you trust him? Silence. That silence had weight to it, like a fifth person in the room. I want to, she said. That answer matters more than yes or no, because wanting to trust someone means you're already negotiating with doubt. Has he ever asked you to keep something from me? I asked. Another pause. Yes. I closed my eyes for a moment. Recently? Yes. What? She hesitated. Just that you wouldn't understand how his business works, that it would confuse you, that you'd worry for no reason. I almost smiled. Almost. I see. I didn't agree with him, she said quickly. I just didn't argue. That's okay. No, it's not. Her voice cracked slightly on that last word. And there it was. Not the full truth. Not yet, but enough. Claire, I said, listen to me very carefully. Okay. If something feels wrong, it usually is. You don't need a spreadsheet to tell you that. I know. And if you're being asked to ignore that feeling, that's not protection. That's control. She didn't answer. Are you safe? I asked. Yes, she said immediately. He's not like that. I didn't ask if he was violent. I know. Another pause. He just needs things to go his way. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. I understand. We sat in that quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, very softly, I don't think I like who I am around him. That sentence landed harder than anything else she had said, because it wasn't about Brent anymore. It was about her. Then that's where you start, I said. With what? With noticing. She let out a small breath that sounded like relief and fear at the same time. Okay, Claire. Yeah? You don't have to figure everything out tonight. I know. But you do have to stop pretending it's nothing. Okay. We ended the call a minute later. I didn't move for a while after. Then I reached for the phone again and called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. This better be good, he said. I'm in the middle of... It's a system, I said. Silence. Explain. I gave him the short version. The fees, the pattern, Claire's call. When I finished, Marcus didn't speak for a few seconds. Then he said, all right, not surprised, not alarmed, just aligned. What are you thinking? I asked. I'm thinking, he said slowly, that if those fees aren't disclosed properly, and if they're being routed through an entity that benefits someone inside the firm, they are. Then you're not looking at aggressive pricing. What am I looking at? You're looking at misrepresentation, possibly worse. I nodded. That's what I thought. And if Brent is tied to that flow, directly or indirectly, he is. Marcus exhaled. Then he's standing on a structure that collapses the moment someone shines a light in the right place. I look down at my notes. Good. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. What are you planning? I paused. Because this was the moment. Not the confrontation, not the reveal, the decision. I'm going to let him walk me into it, I said. Marcus was quiet. Into what? Whatever he thinks he's building. That's vague. Not really? I lean back. He's expanding, taking on new clients, leveraging these fees. At some point, he's going to need something. Capital, approval, signature. Yes. And you think he'll come to you? I know he will. Why? Because he thinks I'm irrelevant. Marcus let out a short laugh. That's a dangerous assumption. For him. Silence again. Then Marcus said, all right, if that's the route, we need to be ready. I agree. I'll start outlining the exposure points, legal angles, documentation requirements. Good. And Daniel? Yeah, don't tip your hand. I won't. I mean it. No questions, no pressure. Let him think he's ahead. I looked at the wall in front of me. Plain, white, unremarkable. He is ahead, I said. Marcus paused. Then, quietly, how far? I touched my watch. Far enough. We ended the call there. I went upstairs, turned off the kitchen light, and stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the street. A car passed, then another. Normal night. Normal neighborhood. Nothing about it suggested that a man 3 miles away was building something that would not survive the next 60 days. Nothing about it suggested that my daughter was standing at the edge of a decision she wasn't ready to name yet. And nothing, absolutely nothing suggested that I already had the one advantage Brent could not see. Control. Not loud, not visible, but absolute. I went downstairs again, opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it Farnham. Inside it, I started placing everything. Client summaries, fee structures, entity maps, timeline notes, voice memos from my own observations recorded at 11:38 p.m., 12:07 a.m., 1:22 a.m., times when thoughts come cleaner because the world is quieter. At 2:11 a.m., I stopped, not because I was done, because I had enough. Enough to understand the shape of it, enough to know what would happen next. I didn't know the exact day. I didn't know the exact words Brent would use, but I knew the moment was coming. The ask, the papers, the version of me he believed he could manipulate into signing something he didn't understand. I closed the laptop slowly, and for the first time since this started, I almost felt sorry for him. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So thank you for real, because when a man builds a system on the assumption that no one is watching, he forgets what happens when someone finally does. And I had been watching from the very beginning. The call came on a Monday morning at 9:26 a.m. I remember the time because I had just finished reviewing a set of shipping invoices for a client in Council Bluffs, and I was about to stand up, stretch, maybe argue with the coffee machine a little. The phone lit up with Brent's name. He doesn't call me, not directly, text sometimes, polite, short, efficient in the way people are when they don't want a real conversation. But a call, that was new. I let it ring once more than necessary. Not to play a game, just to give myself a second to settle into the moment. Then I answered. Daniel, he said, voice smooth, a little brighter than usual. Got a minute? I do. Great. I was actually hoping we could meet. Something business related. I leaned back in my chair. There it was. Business, I repeated. Yeah. Nothing complicated. Just an opportunity I think you'd be interested in. Interested. That word does a lot of work for people who don't want to say what they mean. When? I asked. Today, if you're free. Around noon? My office. I looked at my watch. 9:27 a.m. That works. Perfect. I'll have my assistant set up the conference room, suite 408. I know where it is, I said. A small pause on his end. Just enough. Right, he said. Of course you do. We hung up. I didn't move for a few seconds. Then I stood, walked over to the filing cabinet, and pulled out the Farnham folder. Not the whole thing, just what I needed. I don't bring everything into a room that overwhelms people. makes them defensive. The goal is not to flood the table. The goal is to place one piece down at the exact moment it matters. I selected 3 documents, one client summary with the surcharge highlighted, one entity map showing the flow through Halcyon Bridge, and one page from the trust structure, not labeled, not obvious, but clear to someone who knows what they're looking at. I slid them into a slim folder, closed it, and placed it on my desk. Then I went upstairs, changed my shirt light blue, nothing memorable, and stood in front of the mirror for a second longer than usual. Not vanity, calibration. I don't perform, but I do prepare. At 11:32 a.m., I got into my Accord and drove downtown. Traffic was light. The kind of late morning lull where the city feels like it's taking a breath before lunch. I parked in the garage across from Farnham Street, 3rd level, spot 3C. I always park in the same row if it's available, easier to leave. I sat in the car for a moment, engine off, hands on the wheel, same as before. I counted my breathing once, in, out, in, out. Then I picked up the folder, stepped out, and walked toward the building. Glass front. Clean lines. The kind of place designed to make you feel like things inside it are more important than things outside. I passed through the lobby, nodded at the receptionist, and took the elevator to the 4th floor, suite 408. The door was already open. Brent stood inside, one hand on the back of a chair, the other holding a pen he wasn't using. Daniel, he said, smiling, glad you can make it. I stepped in. Of course. The room was all glass on one side. You could see Farnham Street below, cars moving like quiet decisions. The table was polished, reflective enough to catch light, but not so much that you could see yourself clearly. There were 3 other people in the room, a woman in her late 30s with a tablet and a posture that said she didn't waste time, a man in a navy suit, mid-40s, legal eyes, observing more than participating, and a younger associate, maybe early 30s, sitting slightly back like he hadn't earned his full seat yet. Brent gestured. Daniel, this is Laura Chen, our operations director. Mark Feldman, outside counsel. And Jason, he helps with the modeling. They nodded. I nodded back. No handshakes. Fine. Please, Brent said, indicating a chair across from him. Have a seat. I did. Placed my folder on the table. Closed. Unremarkable. Brent sat opposite me, leaned forward slightly, hands together. Appreciate you coming in on short notice. Happy to listen. He smiled again. Here's the thing about smiles like that. They're not for you. They're for the room. A signal. A way of setting tone, he began. So, as you probably know, we've been expanding quite aggressively over the past year. New clients, new verticals, a lot of growth. I nodded once. Good to hear. We've reached a point, he continued, where we're looking to formalize some of our internal structures, streamline things, create a more efficient framework moving forward. Framework. Another word. Doing work. Laura tapped her tablet once. The screen lit up with a clean presentation. Charts, arrows, numbers that looked right at a glance. Jason shifted slightly in his chair. Mark watched me. Brent kept going. As part of that, we're bringing in a small group of strategic partners, people we trust, people who understand long-term value. He looked at me. You came to mind. I almost smiled. Almost. That's kind of you, I said. It's practical, he corrected. You've got experience, insight, and frankly, you're in a position where this kind of opportunity makes sense. There it was again. Position. I let that sit. What exactly are you asking? I said. He leaned back slightly, relaxed. Now that we were at the core of it, we'd like you to come in as a limited partner in a new holding structure. Halcyon Bridge Capital is being restructured to support our next phase. We're offering you a stake minority, Of course, in exchange for capital and alignment. Alignment. I glanced at the screen. Numbers, projections, clean lines. I didn't look too long. Capital, I said. How much? Brent didn't hesitate. 200,000. Small enough to seem reasonable, large enough to matter, and in return, equity in the holding entity, profit participation, a seat at the table, so to speak. I nodded slowly. And what does Halcyon Bridge actually do? A flicker, just a flicker. It provides financing support for client acquisitions, helps us move faster, close deals more efficiently. That sounds broad. It's designed to be. I let the silence stretch a second longer than comfortable. Then I said, walk me through one client. Brent smiled again, but tighter this time. Of course. He gestured to Laura, who brought up a case. A construction firm, mid-size, recent onboarding. I recognized the numbers immediately, recognized the surcharge, recognized the flow. Laura explained the structure, clean, efficient, nothing obviously wrong if you didn't know what you were looking at. When she finished, Brent looked back at me. Thoughts? I didn't answer right away. I picked up my folder, opened it, slowly took out the first document, placed it on the table. Is this one of yours? I asked. Brent glanced down, then back up. Yes. Explain this line, I said, tapping the surcharge. He didn't look again. It's a standard adjustment, risk-based. For what risk? It's part of the model. I nodded. Show me where it's disclosed. Another flicker. It's embedded in the overall pricing. That's not disclosure. Mark shifted slightly. Laura went still. Jason stopped moving entirely. Brent leaned forward. Daniel, I think you might be over. I held up one hand. Just one. He stopped. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not finished. The room went very quiet. I slid the second document across. The entity map. Walk me through this, I said. Brent looked at it. Really looked this time. His eyes moved once, twice. Something in his jaw tightened. That's internal, he said. I know. Where did you get this? I asked you a question. Silence. Mark cleared his throat slightly. Daniel, he said carefully, perhaps we should. I said his name once. Mark. He stopped. Quiet power doesn't need volume. I looked back at Brent. Follow the line, I said, tapping the page. Client fee, Halcyon Bridge. Then where? Brent didn't answer. Because now he could see it. Not all of it, but enough. I reached into the folder one last time. Took out the third document, the trust page, and placed it between us. Not pushed, not emphasized, just there. Before you answer, I said, you should know something. Brent's eyes flicked to the page, then back to me. I touched my watch. This building, I said, and the entity that controls it, sits inside a structure I oversee. The words didn't land all at once. They moved through the room slowly, like a change in air pressure. Laura's posture shifted. Jason blinked. Mark went very still. Brent didn't move at all. Meaning, I continued, I've been aware of your framework longer than you think. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, just collapse. Not of the business, of the assumption. Brent leaned back in his chair, just slightly. His smile was gone. What are you saying? He asked. I looked at him directly. I'm saying, I replied, you invited me here to sign something you assumed I didn't understand. A pause. And I understand it completely. No one spoke. Outside, a car passed on Farnham Street. Inside, the silence had weight again. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Brent didn't reach for the papers. That was the first thing I noticed. Most men, when confronted, grab something. A pen, a document, their phone, anything to anchor themselves. Brent just sat there, hands still on the table, fingers pressed lightly together like he was trying to remember where they belonged. What are you saying? He asked again, but softer this time. I didn't answer right away. I closed my folder, not slowly, not dramatically, just closed it. I'm saying, I repeated, you built a structure that relies on people not asking questions. His jaw tightened. That's not. I held up one hand. He stopped. I'm not accusing you of anything, I said. I'm describing what I see. That distinction matters. Accusations invite defense. Descriptions force recognition. Mark cleared his throat. Daniel, he said carefully, if there are concerns about disclosure or structure, we can address those through proper channels. I agree, I said. He paused. I fully support proper channels. Laura shifted slightly, finally moving again. Brent looked at her, then at Mark, then back at me. This is being blown out of proportion, he said. These are standard mechanisms. Everyone in this space uses them. Everyone? I asked. He hesitated. Many firms? I nodded once. Then it should be easy to explain. It is. Then do it. Silence. Not long. Just enough. The kind of silence that tells you more than a paragraph ever could. I leaned back in my chair. Here's the thing about moments like this. People expect anger, confrontation, raised voices. They expect the room to crack open and spill something dramatic onto the floor. It doesn't, not if you do it right. It gets quieter. Brent shifted in his seat. You're missing the context, he said. This is about growth, efficiency, positioning the firm for long-term stability. Stability for who? For everyone. I almost smiled. Almost. Claire doesn't think so. That landed. Not like a blow, like a weight. Brent blinked. What does Claire have to do with this? Everything, I said. He looked away for a second. Just a second. But it was enough. I don't appreciate you involving her. She's already involved, I said, whether you acknowledge it or not. Mark leaned forward slightly. Let's keep this focused on the business. I said his name again. Mark. He stopped. I didn't raise my voice. I am keeping it focused. He leaned back. Understood. I looked at Brent. You asked me for $200,000, I said, to align with a structure you haven't fully explained. A structure that includes fees your clients don't clearly understand. Routed through entities you didn't mention until I put them on the table. That's not accurate, he said quickly, then corrected. Another pause. He didn't, because now the room had shifted. Not completely, but enough. The confidence he walked in with, that easy, practiced certainty, had thinned. Not gone, just exposed. And exposed confidence behaves differently. It reaches. It tries to recover. Look, he said, leaning forward again, voice softer now, almost reasonable. Maybe we didn't communicate this as clearly as we could have. That's on us. But the opportunity is still solid. The returns. I'm not investing, I said. Simple. Final. No explanation needed. He blinked. Okay, he said. That's fine. This isn't for everyone. I agree. We sat there for a moment. Then I added, but that's not the part you should be concerned about. That got his attention. What part should I be concerned about? He asked. I looked at him, and for the first time since I walked into that room, I let a little of the truth show. Documentation, I said. His expression didn't change immediately, but something behind it did. You've created a system, I continued, that leaves a trail, not obvious, not loud, but consistent. Consistency is what gets noticed. That's your interpretation. No, I said quietly, it's not. I reached into my pocket and took out a small piece of paper. Folded once. I placed it on the table. Didn't push it. Didn't slide it toward him. Just placed it there. What's that? He asked. 5 client accounts, I said. Dates, fee structures, routing patterns. He didn't pick it up. Why are you showing me this? He asked. Because you invited me here. He frowned. That doesn't make sense. It will. I leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just enough. You assumed I didn't understand what I was looking at, I said. You assumed I wouldn't ask questions. You assumed I'd sign something because it sounded good and felt easy. He didn't respond. You were wrong, I said. The room stayed quiet. Outside, the light had shifted. Noon moving into early afternoon. The kind of light that makes glass look sharper. Laura finally spoke. Brent, she said carefully, we may want to pause here. He didn't look at her. Mark added, I think that's wise. Brent exhaled slowly. For a moment, I thought he might push back, double down, try to reclaim the room. He didn't. He leaned back. Okay, he said. Let's pause. Smart. Not enough, but smart. I stood. Not abruptly, just stood. They all looked up. I'm going to leave, I said. You should review your structures carefully. Brent nodded once. Tight. Controlled. Daniel, he said, we can resolve this. I looked at him. I'm sure you can resolve something, I said. The question is what? I picked up my folder, turned, walked toward the door. Then I stopped. Not for long. Just enough. Brent, I said, without turning around. Yeah? I glanced back. You might want to start with the word disclosure. I left. The hallway felt cooler than the conference room. Or maybe that was just me. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. No one followed. The doors opened. I stepped in, pressed L. As the elevator moved, I touched my watch. The scratch between 10 and 11 caught the light. Margaret used to say that Mark gave it character. I think she was right. Outside, Farnham Street looked exactly the same as it had an hour earlier. Cars moving, people crossing, nothing changed, and yet everything had. I got into my car, sat for a moment, then started the engine. I didn't drive right away. I sat, hands on the wheel, same as always. You know what I did? I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny, because it was finished. Not the consequences, not the fallout. Those would take time, but the part that mattered, the part where he thought he was ahead, that was over. Over the next few weeks, things unfolded the way they tend to when structure meets scrutiny. Questions got asked. Internally first, then externally. Clients noticed things they hadn't noticed before. Patterns that had been invisible became less so. I didn't push. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send emails or make statements. I let the system do what systems do when light hits them. They respond. Claire moved out 2 months later. Not dramatically. No scene. Just a quiet Saturday, a borrowed truck, and 3 trips between apartments. I helped her carry a box of books up a narrow set of stairs. At the top, she set it down, looked at me, and said, I didn't see it for a long time. I know, I said. I kept thinking if I just adjusted a little, it would feel right again. I nodded. It doesn't work that way. She smiled. Small, tired, real. No, she said. It doesn't. We stood there for a second. Then she said, thank you. I didn't ask for what. I didn't need to. Some days I wonder if I did the right thing. Most days I know I did. That's enough. Brent and I don't speak anymore. We're civil when we have to be. Short conversations, practical, no performance, no assumptions, just distance. Claire is finding her way back to herself. It's not fast, it's not clean, but it's hers. And me? I still wake up at 5:42. I still feed the neighbor's cat. I still drink coffee that argues with me. And sometimes late at night, I go downstairs, open the filing cabinet, and look at the Farnham folder. Not because I need to, because I remember how quiet it got. I remember the moment a man realized he had been standing on someone else's ground the entire time. And I remember choosing not to destroy him completely because I could have. That's the part people don't talk about. Power isn't in what you do. It's in what you decide not to do. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.